When Cambodia recently finalized a landmark aviation agreement with China to acquire 20 C909 aircraft, the world took notice. 10 of these are confirmed purchases, representing an investment of approximately $380 million US. The remaining 10 exist as letters of intent, preliminary agreements that, while not yet legally binding, stand a strong chance of converting into actual orders if China meets delivery schedules and the aircraft demonstrates consistent reliability in real-world operations. This raises some intriguing questions. What exactly is the C909? Does this Chinese-manufactured aircraft possess the capability to rival the dominance of Boeing and Airbus? And perhaps most curiously, why would Cambodia opt for the C909 instead of China's more widely recognized C919? If you appreciate in-depth aviation and global economics content like this, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest investigations into the stories reshaping our world. Now let's dive deep into this fascinating development. For anyone who has traveled by commercial airline, chances are overwhelming that your journey took place aboard an aircraft manufactured by either America's Boeing or Europe's Airbus. This isn't coincidental. It reflects a century-long reality where these two manufacturing powerhouses have maintained an iron grip on the global commercial aviation sector. The numbers tell a striking story. Based on 2024 industry data, Boeing commands roughly 40% of the worldwide market share in commercial aircraft manufacturing. Airbus edges slightly ahead with approximately 46%. Together, these two corporations control nearly 90% of the market, a duopoly that has remained largely unchallenged for decades. But the aviation landscape is beginning to shift beneath our feet. A new competitor is emerging from the east, one that cannot be easily dismissed or ignored. China's domestically engineered aircraft are starting to make their presence felt on the international stage, challenging assumptions about who can build world-class commercial airplanes. Over recent years, China has invested enormous resources into developing indigenous commercial aircraft programs. The most prominent among these is the C919, a narrow-body jet that has captured significant global attention. To date, the C919 has secured commitments from 21 international customers, with cumulative orders exceeding 1,400 aircraft, an impressive achievement for a newcomer to the commercial aviation market. What makes this even more remarkable is the diversity of these customers. In 2023, General Electric Aviation, an American company deeply embedded in the Western aviation ecosystem, committed $2.2 billion to purchase 20 C919 aircraft. Germany's Polen Airlines ordered 7 units. Gallop Air from Brunei placed an order for 15 aircraft. While the majority of C919 orders originate from major Chinese domestic carriers, the growing international interest signals that the aircraft is being taken seriously beyond China's borders. Yet there's another Chinese aircraft that deserves attention, one that operates somewhat under the radar compared to its more famous sibling. This is the C909, and it represents a different strategic approach to breaking into the global aviation market. To understand the C909, we need to look back at its predecessor, the ARJ-21. This aircraft represents China's first serious attempt at developing a domestically produced regional jet. The project officially launched 23 years ago, and after 6 years of intensive research and development, the ARJ-21 completed its inaugural test flight in Shanghai in 2008. The ARJ-21 spent years building a track record in Chinese domestic service, gradually proving its operational reliability and establishing itself as a viable option for regional routes within China. By 2024, COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, made a strategic decision to rebrand the ARJ-21 as the C909. Why change a name that had already gained recognition in the domestic market? The answer lies in China's broader ambitions. When the ARJ-21 was originally conceived, it was designed primarily for the Chinese domestic aviation network. But as China's aviation industry matured and set its sights on competing internationally, A cohesive and globally recognizable branding strategy became essential. In an industry dominated by names like Boeing's 7 Series and Airbus's A Series, having a unified product family sends a message. By renaming the ARJ21 as the C909 and positioning it alongside the C919 and the upcoming C929, COMAC created a clear product hierarchy that international airlines and aviation authorities could easily understand. It's a seemingly simple change that carries significant strategic weight. So, let's talk about what the C909 actually brings to the table. The C909 is classified as a turbofan-powered regional jet, which means it sits just below the narrow-body mainline aircraft that most travelers are familiar with. Its specifications really reflect this unique positioning. Depending on the specific configuration, the C909 offers a range somewhere between about 2,225 kilometers and 3,700 kilometers. That's more than enough for connecting cities within a region. But it's not really designed for those long transcontinental flights. When it comes to passenger capacity, you're typically looking at anywhere from 78 to 90 seats, depending on how airlines decide to set up the cabin. The aircraft is built tough, too. It boasts a design service life of 60,000 flight hours, which points to some pretty robust engineering meant to keep it flying reliably for decades. With these specs, the C909 is ideally suited for short-haul and medium-haul routes, especially those linking smaller cities or serving regions where passenger demand doesn't quite justify sending in a larger plane. It really fills a specific niche in the aviation ecosystem, one that often gets overlooked in conversations dominated by those big flagship wide-body jets. Now, if you compare it to the C919, the difference is pretty striking. The C919 is a single-aisle mainline commercial aircraft, going head-to-head with the Airbus A320 family and Boeing's 737 series. It's aimed right at the heart of the commercial aviation market, those medium-range routes that are the backbone of most airlines' networks. The C909, on the other hand, was initially developed to serve China's 3 major state-owned airlines on domestic routes. But, its journey didn't stop there. It's actually managed to break out of those original boundaries, opening doors in markets that the traditional aviation giants have sometimes overlooked. Now, let's look at how the C909 started making waves internationally, especially in Southeast Asia. The C909's international debut happened in December 2022, when China delivered its very first unit to Indonesia's Transnusa Airlines. That was a pretty big deal, the aircraft's first step beyond Chinese airspace into commercial service with a foreign airline. The Indonesian experience turned out to be really important for building the C909's reputation. Over the next 3 years, Transnusa operated the aircraft in high-frequency service all across Indonesia's challenging geography, a landscape full of islands, unpredictable weather, and all sorts of airport infrastructure. Throughout this demanding environment, the C909 performed reliably, gradually earning credibility with each successful flight. In 2025, Transnusa's confidence in the aircraft was clear when they ordered 2 additional C909s. That's a powerful endorsement, honestly, and it speaks louder than any marketing campaign could. When an airline comes back for more, you know the aircraft has met or even exceeded their expectations. This strong track record in Indonesia helped open doors all across Southeast Asia. In March 2025, COMAC delivered a C909 to Lao Airlines through a leasing arrangement, expanding the aircraft's operational presence even further. Vietnam wasn't far behind, showing a lot of interest in the Chinese-made regional jet. On April 19th of this year, 2 C909 aircraft provided by Chengdu Airlines under a wet lease arrangement started service with Vietjet Air, running the important Hanoi-Can Tho Ho Chi Minh City route. This deployment is especially significant because wet leasing is a pretty sophisticated form of international aviation cooperation. In a wet lease, the lessor doesn't just provide the aircraft. They supply the whole operational package: flight crew, maintenance staff, and full support systems. The airline getting the wet lease only needs to handle route planning, scheduling, and commercial operations, while all the technical and operational stuff stays with the lessor. This setup lets airlines boost capacity quickly, while the aircraft and crew get valuable experience in new markets. These different cooperation models, direct purchases, operating leases, wet leases, and dry leases, give Chinese-made aircraft multiple ways to break into international markets. And honestly, every successful deployment builds visibility and credibility, often sparking interest from neighboring countries who are watching closely. Which brings us to Cambodia's recent move. Just 2 weeks ago, Cambodia Airways signed a comprehensive memorandum of understanding with China to acquire 20 C909 aircraft. The structure of this deal is pretty interesting. 10 are firm orders, valued at around $380 million, while the other 10 are intention orders. Intention orders kind of sit in the middle. They're not legally binding like confirmed purchases, but they do show serious interest and set up a framework for future deals. If China delivers the first 10 aircraft on time, and they perform well in Cambodia, it's very likely those intention orders will turn into firm purchases. It's a smart risk mitigation strategy for both sides. Cambodia gets to see how the aircraft performs in real-world service before making a total commitment, while China gets another chance to prove its product in a new market. But the agreement goes way beyond just selling planes. Both sides have agreed to cooperate on a bunch of fronts, from introducing and integrating the aircraft to ongoing operational support, comprehensive training programs for talent, and even broader development of aviation-related industries. This kind of holistic approach really points to a long-term partnership, not just a simple transaction. Some observers might question why Cambodia didn't opt for the more prominent C919 or even aircraft from established Western manufacturers. The answer reveals important insights about aviation economics and operational requirements. Different countries face different aviation challenges based on their geography, infrastructure, and traffic patterns. Southeast Asian nations like Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia present unique operational environments. These countries feature terrain dominated by islands, mountains, and river deltas. Land areas tend to be relatively compact, and airport infrastructure varies significantly in quality and capability. Runway lengths often face limitations due to geographic constraints or development histories. In such environments, large mainline aircraft frequently represent overkill. A Boeing 737 or Airbus A320 might offer more seats and longer range, but if you're operating routes between smaller cities with limited passenger demand, that excess capacity becomes an economic liability. You're burning more fuel, requiring longer runways, and paying higher operating costs, all to carry empty seats. The C909, by contrast, was engineered from its inception as a regional jet specifically designed for operational environments with modest infrastructure requirements and high adaptability needs. Compared to mainline aircraft that demand longer runways, more sophisticated ground support equipment, and higher minimum passenger loads to operate economically, the C909 offers clear advantages in flexibility and accessibility. Furthermore, the C909's design allows for modification to serve multiple purposes beyond passenger transport. The airframe can be adapted for cargo operations, medical evacuation missions, or even business jet conversions. This multi-purpose versatility makes it particularly attractive to countries building out aviation capabilities across multiple sectors simultaneously. Cost considerations add another compelling dimension to the C909's appeal. While the C909 functionally competes with single-aisle jets serving short and medium-haul routes, similar territory to the Airbus A320neo and Boeing 737 MAX series, the pricing tells a dramatically different story. A C909 carries a unit price of approximately $38 million. Compare that to the Airbus A320neo, which starts around $100 million, or the Boeing 737 MAX 8, which reaches approximately $110 million. The Chinese aircraft costs roughly one-third the price of its Western competitors. For many countries, particularly developing nations experiencing rapid growth in air travel demand, this price differential is transformative. Aviation authorities and airlines must balance ambitious expansion goals against budget constraints and operating cost realities. When you can acquire 3 C909s for the price of one 737 MAX, the economic calculus shifts dramatically, especially if the operational capabilities align well with your network requirements. This doesn't mean the C909 is simply a budget option. Rather, it represents a different value proposition, one that prioritizes accessibility and fit-for-purpose design over prestige branding. For airlines operating in markets where every dollar matters, this approach makes compelling sense. Safety, the non-negotiable standard. Yet in commercial aviation, no amount of cost savings justifies compromising safety. Aircraft must prove their reliability through extensive testing and real-world operations before earning the trust of passengers, pilots, and regulators. Since entering commercial service in 2016, the C909 has compiled a substantial operational record. Approximately 170 aircraft have been delivered, safely transporting more than 23 million passengers and accumulating over 100,000 flight hours. Currently, C909s operate in Indonesia, Laos, and Vietnam, serving 15 routes across Southeast Asia and having carried more than 250,000 passengers in that region alone. This safety record stands in stark contrast to the controversies that have plagued Boeing's 737 MAX 8, events that shook the aviation industry to its core and fundamentally altered how airlines and regulators evaluate aircraft safety. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 crashed shortly after departing Jakarta, Indonesia, killing all 189 people aboard. The subsequent investigation revealed a catastrophic chain of failures. A malfunctioning angle of attack sensor triggered repeated erroneous activations of the MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, an automated anti-stall system. This system forced the aircraft's nose downward repeatedly, and despite the pilot's attempts to counteract the commands, they ultimately could not regain control. Less than 5 months later, on March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 suffered a nearly identical failure, claiming 157 lives. Both accidents stemmed from the interaction between the MCS system and sensor malfunctions, a design flaw that Boeing had failed to adequately address or even fully disclose to airlines and pilots. The aftermath was unprecedented. Aviation authorities worldwide grounded the entire 737 MAX fleet. Boeing faced billions in losses, criminal investigations, congressional hearings, and a crisis of trust that continues to reverberate through the industry. Airlines and passengers alike became acutely aware that even established manufacturers with century-long reputations could make catastrophic errors. In this context, the C909's clean safety record, while based on a smaller sample size, becomes a meaningful selling point. For countries and airlines evaluating new aircraft purchases, the 737 MAX disasters serve as a sobering reminder that brand heritage alone doesn't guarantee safety or reliability. Market projections, a window of opportunity. Looking forward, the numbers suggest substantial opportunity for the C909 and its target markets. Industry forecasts project that over the next 20 years, Southeast Asia will require more than 2,000 new passenger aircraft to meet growing demand. Approximately 30% of that requirement, nearly 600 aircraft, will come from the regional jet category. The C909 has already established operational presence in 4 Southeast Asian countries: Indonesia, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. If Chinese manufacturers can capture even 10% of the projected regional jet market in Southeast Asia, that would translate to roughly 60 aircraft, a substantial expansion that would firmly establish the C909 as a significant player in Asian regional aviation. Beyond Southeast Asia, Africa represents another promising expansion market for the C909. From geographic and infrastructure perspectives, Africa shares notable similarities with Southeast Asia in terms of aviation transport challenges. The continent features vast territories with scattered city distribution, relatively underdeveloped infrastructure, a limited number of large hub airports, and regional aviation networks that remain significantly underdeveloped compared to other continents. These conditions create demand for exactly the type of aircraft the C909 represents: smaller jets offering flexibility, lower operating costs, and the ability to operate from airports with modest infrastructure. The C909 could potentially become an important catalyst in developing and upgrading Africa's regional aviation connectivity, linking secondary cities and underserved markets that larger aircraft cannot economically reach. The broader implications: a shifting global order. The emergence of Chinese commercial aircraft like the C909 represents more than just new competition in the aviation manufacturing sector. It signals a fundamental shift in global industrial capabilities and market dynamics. For nearly a century, the commercial aircraft industry has operated as a duopoly, with Boeing and Airbus dividing the market between them. This concentration of manufacturing capability in the United States and Europe reflected broader patterns of industrial development, technological leadership, and global economic power. China's entrance into this exclusive club demonstrates how industrial capabilities can shift over time. Building commercial aircraft requires mastering extraordinarily complex engineering challenges: materials science, aerodynamics, avionics, manufacturing precision, supply chain integration, and regulatory certification processes that span years and cost billions. The fact that China has successfully developed not just one but multiple commercial aircraft programs indicates a level of technological maturity that deserves recognition. This has strategic implications beyond aviation. Commercial aircraft manufacturing represents a pinnacle of industrial achievement, requiring integration of numerous advanced technologies and manufacturing capabilities. Countries that can successfully build commercial aircraft demonstrate industrial depth that extends into numerous other sectors: advanced materials, electronics, precision manufacturing, software development, and project management at massive scale. For developing countries observing these dynamics, China's aviation industry offers an alternative to the traditional Western suppliers who have monopolized the market. This creates leverage in negotiations, introduces price competition, and provides options when political considerations might complicate purchases from Western manufacturers. However, challenges remain for Chinese aviation manufacturers. Certification from Western aviation authorities, particularly the FAA in the United States and EASA in Europe, remains difficult to obtain. These agencies maintain stringent standards, and some observers note that certification processes for Chinese aircraft face additional scrutiny due to geopolitical tensions. Without FAA and EASA certification, Chinese aircraft cannot operate in many of the world's largest aviation markets, significantly limiting their global reach. Additionally, many components in Chinese aircraft still rely on Western suppliers, particularly for critical systems like engines, avionics, and flight controls. While China is working to develop indigenous alternatives, achieving complete self-sufficiency in all aircraft systems remains years away. This creates potential vulnerabilities if geopolitical tensions escalate and supply chains become weaponized. Yet despite these challenges, the trajectory is clear. Chinese commercial aircraft are gaining market share, building operational track records, and establishing themselves as credible alternatives, particularly in developing markets where price sensitivity is high and alignment with Western geopolitical priorities is less certain. Conclusion: the future of flight takes new shape. The aviation industry stands at an inflection point. For decades, the question of where your commercial aircraft came from had essentially two answers: Seattle or Toulouse, Boeing or Airbus. That binary choice reflected not just market concentration, but broader patterns of global technological leadership and industrial capability. Cambodia's decision to acquire 20 C909 aircraft, and similar choices being made across Southeast Asia and potentially Africa, suggests we're entering a new era. The skies are opening to new possibilities, new manufacturers, and new strategic relationships that would have seemed unlikely just a decade ago. Whether Chinese aircraft manufacturers can truly challenge the Boeing-Airbus duopoly in the mainstream global market remains to be seen. Significant obstacles persist: regulatory hurdles, supply chain dependencies, and the inherent conservatism of an industry where safety concerns make airlines cautious about embracing newcomers. But in regional markets, particularly in developing countries prioritizing affordability and practical capability over brand prestige, Chinese aircraft are finding their niche. And niches have a way of expanding, especially when the incumbent players stumble or when geopolitical winds shift in unexpected directions. The C909 may never carry as many passengers as a 737 or A320. It may never become the default choice for major international carriers. But it doesn't need to achieve those goals to be successful. By serving routes that larger aircraft cannot economically reach, by offering price points that developing countries can afford, and by building a reputation for reliability one flight at a time, the C909 is carving out space in a market that was once considered impenetrable.